autopsy on the Packers.
Yep.
The defense under Mike Pettin did not take the step forward that they thought. We talk about Deshaun Watson and DeAndre Hopkins being the only two guys. There are other guys grading well in the Green Bay offense, but if you look at the receiver grades, it's Devontae Adams and no one else.
Yeah.
And Rodgers had this incredible season of he made a lot of good throws. He didn't make a ton of disastrous throws, but he didn't have a lot of value add throws. So positively graded throws. We talk about Big Ben. If you're going to get to this mid-tier grade, you better do it by adding a ton of value. So if you're missing one out of every 3 throws, it's not great. Like you want to play better than that, or one out of every 2 throws. But if you're moving the chains, you can offset it a little bit. That's Big Ben. So it doesn't feel as bad. Rodgers didn't have that. He had key misses at the wrong times. So the overall grade was good, but a million throwaways. He didn't trust the scheme. So I think, even though he graded well, he left a ton of value on the table. Either not playing within the scheme, not trusting his receivers, taking too many sacks. He left a ton of potential value and production on the table.
Yeah.
But the primary cause of death has to be on the other side of the ball.
Yeah.
Right?
I think injuries took a real hammer to this team.
Yeah.
And they, again, were forced into depth pretty quickly and didn't have the depth.
Right.
So they're a bit like the Falcons, and I think their primary cause of death was coverage, but for a different reason. I think the Packers relied on a lot of very young players, and they flashed a lot of ability. Guys like Jair Alexander, their first-round corner, looks like he could be a potential star going forward.
Yeah.
But he was also exposed at times, as you'd expect for a rookie cornerback.
Yeah,
it
right.
happens, right? Now, this has happened to Green Bay before. They drafted a couple of young cornerbacks a few years ago in Demarius Randall and Quentin Rollins, and both those guys as rookies had some really impressive plays and flash and looked like they would be stars going forward. They graded well in limited sample size, and then that just fell off a cliff. Now, the big question for Green Bay going forward is what happens to their young players next time? Do they get the same thing, or do these ones actually pan out?
The warning there that we always try to give fans is that player progression is not the way it is in Madden.
Right.
Oh, he's a 78 this year. He'll go +2. Then he'll go +3. He'll hit his peak in year. It doesn't always just go linear. They get better. I do like Jair Alexander. I do like Josh Jackson. We liked them coming out. We like their future. But they've invested a ton at the corner position, which, by the way, is the right way to build a team. We talk about this, right? You just keep throwing resources at cornerback. But Kevin King was this high upside type of guy 2 years ago, only plays 304 snaps. He gets banged up and everything, and he's not great when he's on the field. They've thrown a ton of resources at the cornerback position, and right now it looks like Jair Alexander has the best future. That was their first-round pick this year, but there's a lot of question marks, around him. And the linebacker position pretty much continues to be a major issue for them. Blake Martinez, when healthy and on the field, does some nice things, but they haven't had a really good linebacking core for a while. But the thing we liked about them was the potential of having Muhammad Wilkerson helping. He only played 115 snaps.
Right.
Kenny Clark took that next step. But the idea, Mike Daniels took a little bit of a step back and only played 419 snaps. The idea coming in was that, Kenny Clark, Mike Daniels, a rejuvenated, motivated Muhammad Wilkerson is going to aid that young secondary. And other than Kenny Clark, we didn't really see that this year.
Yeah, and it looked like it could. Wilkerson played well before he went down. Then injury robbed. Again, like I say, injury robbed them of a potentially very significant playmaker on the defensive line. I think that would have panned out pretty well. And he was a guy who was kind of vital to that Pettin-style scheme back with the Jets, a guy that could move across the line, play every one of those positions along that defensive front, and be a really disruptive player. And we just didn't get to see it because we got robbed of him. And same kind of story on offense, which is it was Devontae Adams, and then we had to cycle through all the rookie wide receivers, and we just didn't get to see Rodgers build up any kind of trust level and chemistry with anybody outside of Devontae Adams.
Devontae was spectacular. I was looking at some numbers recently too, as far as because we track all this stuff. Single coverage, how many times was he targeted when he was open? Devontae Adams, most in the league. So I do think a lot of people like to blame Mike McCarthy for this whole thing, right? It's his scheme, it's too conservative and all this stuff. And we have posed the question, what if it was Aaron Rodgers? I think it's okay to have a nuanced discussion about this, right? I think Aaron Rodgers was to blame for some of the stuff. I'm sure Mike McCarthy and just, a stale offense was part to blame. I don't think the solution, while I think Rodgers is a fantastic quarterback to build around, and every good offensive coordinator should want to work with him in Green Bay, I also don't think that just getting the next creative offensive mind in there is this perfect quick fix. You get Rodgers back up to throwing 50 touchdowns and all that stuff. I don't know that it's going to be that easy. I think Rodgers was to blame for some of this stuff.
The Packers are going to be one of the most fascinating teams in 2019 because whoever comes in, you have to assume that they're going to have some kind of new vision for the offense. And we're going to see two things. One, how prepared Aaron Rodgers is to accept somebody else's ideas. This is what I want to do. This is what the offense is going to need to look like. This is how you need to play within it. First of all, how willing he is to do that. And secondly, what that looks like.
Yeah.
Like Rodgers being bent into some other offense. What does Aaron Rodgers look like outside of this Mike McCarthy offense and in this new idea scheme? Or if we're going to start to see, actually next year he is a significant part of the issue.
There's some nuanced stuff to this too, because remember when McAdoo left Green Bay and went to the Giants,
right?
And he completely changed, just like Eli's stance in the shotgun. We got to go left foot in front of right foot. So he changed his stance. There's some footwork, nuanced stuff that is in this McCarthy-McAdoo offense that is very different from the rest of the NFL. And it was a lot of quick hitters, slant flat, and maybe they overdid it with some of the stuff. But there's a lot of things that are different. I wonder how much the new offensive coordinator comes in and says, all right, we'll keep the same footwork, but we're gonna run more 5-step instead of 3. I'm just very curious to know how this goes. But primary cause of death, do we call it injuries?
Yeah.
Or just defense?
I would roll with injuries. I think they lost a lot of talent overall. And
injuries
really hurt them.
Secondary cause of death. Secondary.
Yeah, secondary was the secondary cause of death.
And I don't think Rodgers is the cause of death. I think the passing game as a whole just deserves blame.
Yeah.
The inefficiency of the passing game, a little bit of Rodgers' fault, but he still graded really well. I mean, when you get that PFF grade and you're able to make those big-time throws and not turn the ball over, like you should be efficient, but the inability to just find positive plays and positive plays and positive plays wasn't there. And that's a receiver and quarterback issue in my mind.
Right. I mean, the idea that Jimmy Graham was going to come in, catch 10 touchdowns just because of the red zone skills he has and Rodgers hitting him with those back shoulder throws. Jimmy Graham was a disaster this year. 2 touchdowns. He had 55 catches, but he graded poorly, didn't look like the player he's been in the past. He did look like the guy who was done up in Seattle, but at least Seattle figured out that he could just be a jump ball weapon in the red zone. He couldn't even do that this year. That connection didn't work. So it really was just Rodgers to Adams and whatever they could fashion on the ground with Aaron Jones, etc. Yeah, the passing game was poor, and it obviously wasn't just Rodgers, but yeah, tertiary cause of death, the listless passing game.